Hey everyone, welcome back to Dan Roth Live. I'm happy to see you. Brian, it's good to have you in the audience. Looks like we got a decent amount of people tuning in. So, if you were around last week, we talked a little bit about neurodiversity. I talked with Rachel Beck. Uh, this week, I got really lucky because I've been speaking to what I'll call a new friend for quite some time. And it took us a while to connect because, in part, we're both ADHD. The other part of it was that we're so ADHD that I wound up forgetting that we had set it up. So we got pushed back a week, which is completely my fault. Uh, so, as we got talking and we started discussing how each of us fit into the neurodiversity community, the ADHD community, we started to see a lot of commonality. And within that commonality, we built a friendship. Now, before I bring her on, I want to explain a little bit of why it's so important because when we talk about neurodiversity, there's a lot of aspects to it. There's the aspect of just having it, there's the aspect of, kind of training and the social, but then there's the hidden aspect. And what I mean by the hidden aspect is when a child is born neurodiverse, a lot of times accommodations need to be met, need to be had. And there's a lot of overwhelm and confusion that comes into play when we try to define what these accommodations are, but not only what they are, but how we get them. Things like taking extra time on tests, being able to walk around the room, things like working more closely with your teachers. All these things combined are what are intertwined into what we call an IEP. Lisa is an expert at this. Having gone through her own sense of overwhelm and having to learn the process on her own, she has now made it easier for coaches, parents, and educators to really navigate this neurodiversity learning journey, which is why I'm extremely appreciative, honored to have Lisa as part of this so important conversation. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, how are you? Not as honored as I am to have been asked to be here, Dan. I'm really grateful.
You know, when we first connected, I don't think either one of us knew what to expect. And as part of that testing out that comes with being ADHD, and there are times, and just to put this for everybody, we're going to try to be structured today, but I want to acknowledge that you're with two ADHD individuals. So if we go off the rails, that's just who we are. So expect the
And I'm a
honesty.
highly sensitive person who cries at the drop of a hat. So, on top of it,
And I am the person that does not cry, but I will be with you to cry if you need me to be empathetic with you. I have some water here. I could pour some down on my fingers and let it go down my cheeks. Tara Argo, who's a good friend of mine, will absolutely cry with you. I guarantee you that. So, Lisa, first of all, let me ask, because when I see your last name, I go back to the hockey players I grew up with, and your last name, French Canadian wise, would have been Richet. How do you pronounce your last name for everybody?
richer.
Richer. Okay, that's even better because ADHD people are very rarely richer. Got it. so, so I appreciate you clarifying that. Many times on this show, I'll ask people to tell me about themselves from scratch. I think for us, and not that I want to rush it, but this is such an important topic. Instead of going through about you individually, which people can absolutely find out if you go to journeytobloom.com or contact Lisa at journeytobloom.com. But more importantly, can you tell everybody about how you started your ADHD journey and then bringing it into what went into creating this resource that is so desperately needed for those parents and educators to really identify and see what they need to do to get accommodations.
Absolutely. So, I have to go back to come forward. And you know that I go all over. In fact, you very tactfully said to me in one of our conversations, I need to just stop. I need to say something. So if that happens, just stop me. I didn't even well, when I was growing up, we didn't even know what ADHD was. It was through my younger son that I realized, wow, and people saying you're ADHD, you're this, and taking online, assessments of it. But I was an elite level athlete. So I was in a gym 6, 7, 8 hours a day, depending on what time of year it was. I was a gymnast in the 80s. So from the late 70s all the way through 90, I was in a gym, crazy hours, constantly in motion with my head and focused on things, laser focused. But then there was school where I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't retain things. It just became very difficult for me. And so over time, with my younger one, I recognized just how much of it I had of things that he had. However, how I got on this path and where we are now really stemmed from my older son, who's now 15, who's on the spectrum. And we didn't know, I was first time mom. We didn't know what was going on. I was completely overwhelmed, didn't know what I didn't know, had everybody and their brother trying to tell me what to do, how to do it, and all of that. And so I was so overwhelmed, and it has led me through my experiences with my children to create this journey to bloom, because it's really, really important for people to understand they're not alone, to understand that there are way more things that fall under the neurodiversity umbrella than anybody ever gives one credit for, and that accommodations and IEP goals and all of that are so essential. And the earlier the intervention, the better off you are.
So, Lisa, thank you for bringing us through that. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start off by defining what really falls under the neurodiverse umbrella, because this is a relatively new term. When you and I were growing up, not only was it ADHD, but the DSM also recognized ADD, with it being inattentive. So you just mentioned what your son is going through. Can you explain what different, I don't even like to call them conditions or disorder, but what different variations are within neurodiversity?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question. And one that I spent the last year and a half really doing research in, because it is so complex. The neurodiversity umbrella can be everything from autism spectrum disorder, ADD, ADHD. It could be anxiety, depression, dyslexia, dysgraphia, visual processing disorder, executive functioning. It could be a traumatic brain injury that created that cognitive difference. So the realm of a non-neurotypical person is vast and varied. And you can look at, I've put visuals up on occasion to help to educate people. And every time I pull up a visual, I see something different, because they're constantly evolving and figuring out. And one person might say, oh, well, in my expert experience, this doesn't fall under it, and another one does. I believe that neurodiversity covers all of those things, because if you're not a typically developing learner, the mainstream way doesn't make sense to you. There is something else happening, and you need to be taught or learn in a different facet.
And I appreciate you bringing that to the table, because it does cover so many things. And one of the things that brought to mind to me was the fact that, as of current, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the Americans with Disability Act only covers anxiety and depression, but it doesn't cover bias against any of the other neurodiverse conditions. Is that accurate?
That is a great question. And I honestly do not have the answer, but I am actually going to go look that up and find out. I don't know. I'm not certain.
I promise you, I was not doing that to throw you off. So for everybody that,
We all don't know everything, right? We're
yeah,
always doing
no,
something. So yes, I'm not certain on that.
No, absolutely. And for those that are wondering what I was talking about, why I was asking, the Americans with Disability Act protects those that have certain conditions from bias, from being mislabeled. So if you're in a work environment and you deal with anxiety and depression, somebody can't fire you for that. But those protections, from what my knowledge is, have only covered those two and don't extend. Now, there's a difference. Accommodations, which is what we're going to be talking about with IEP and some of these other programs, those are things that you could get, but they're accommodations, uh, not legal statutes of protection.
Mhm.
So here's what I'm going to do, because I want to be open and honest with everybody. And I think I usually have. My name is Dan. I have ADHD. I grew up with anxiety. I grew up with depression. I grew up with something called language processing disorder, which means I know what I'm trying to say up here, but it's hard for me to get out things down here. That is how I have ADHD. And I found out at age 7. So I've known about this for quite some time. A lot of people we're seeing have found out about it later in life. There used to be this thing where you grow out of ADHD in adolescence. Wow, were they wrong? Um, so,
You don't
so
find out, you learn how to cope with it.
yeah, you learn better how to cope with it, but at the same time, I think it's 4 to 6 years. Socially, people with ADHD develop about 4 to 6 years slower than those that are neurotypical. So you learn to work with it, but at the same time, you're still constantly catching up. Uh, what's your experience, if you don't mind sharing? And then what we could do is, I really want to make sure that uh, we focus on some research. So we could talk a little bit about the different kinds of plans, accommodations, IEPs versus what is
The
it, the
504.
504?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to address something. I wasn't when you asked me about the American Disabilities Act. It sounds like you were specifically talking to like in the workplace, right? And so um, when you think about I'm not going to go into legal jargon. I was an HR leader for a long time, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to go into some of that legal jargon. But what I will say, and one of the things that I'm recognizing, and I had some in-depth conversations with a very large um, tech-enabled data analytics organization about health and wellness, and what were they focusing on in terms of it. And they said anxiety and depression. And I said, well, what is the underlying conditions of the anxiety and depression, or triggers? Let's not use the word condition. I don't like that term either. The underlying triggers. And they said, what do you mean? And my response was, well, to your point, Dan, and this is, I think, really timely and important. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? With my younger son, it's we treated his ADHD first. And boy, was that a mistake. And it wasn't until we sat in on some people that were focused in on anxiety and ADHD combined. Now, our psychiatrist wasn't bad. He just didn't know what he didn't know. And when we asked a question, which should we be treating first? It was like a light bulb moment. Unless you treat the anxiety so that you can clear the forest from the trees right in your brain and set a path forward, there's no way to be able to show up and then give someone those tools to help them live in a neurotypical world, because the anxiety continues to get higher and higher. You disconnect from social aspects, you disconnect from curriculum in the schools, you disconnect from being able to do your job because the anxiety and depression has taken over. So there's some intertwining with any of these different things that are the disabilities, the conditions, whatever we want to call them, that trigger anxiety and depression. So while that's at the forefront, um, will these underlying neurodiversities ever be covered under ADA from a legality standpoint? Like, really? I don't know. But if we're dealing with the triggers instead of the labels, then we are going to get further and bring all of this together. And you were talking about the different things that you know that you are. I no doubt I'm ADHD. I'm no doubt that I am a highly sensitive person. And I was told for years, you're too sensitive, you're too passionate, you're too this. Well, it's who I am, and now I get to show it every single day in what I'm doing. So this is just great. Like, I get to do what we're doing here, but I also get to educate and help others understand. It doesn't make me wrong because I cry in a meeting. It doesn't make me wrong because I cry when I'm happy, sad, mad, or I use my hands and I get excited about things, and have to remember to slow down because I talk faster when my anxiety gets in play. What I want to just say, one other thing here, is my older son, who's on the spectrum, he had OT delay, speech delay, pragmatic, social skill issues, sensory processing disorder, which he had the visual, the auditory, and the tags and all of that. Like, I don't even know what size half his clothes were when he was younger because everything got cut out. And then my younger one, ADHD, the complex, the inattentive, hyperactive, and impulsive. Like, he's got the kudos of all, like, the mammoth. He has visual processing disorder. He has absence seizures. He has the complex anxiety. There's all these factors, but socially, he is the funniest, most engaging child out there. So very, very different on the complexities. And that means that their accommodations, their goals, their supports, their abilities and capabilities are extremely different. And it was through navigating the last 15 years of my kids' experiences that created Journey to Bloom to actually finally get lifted. I mean, this has been something I've been trying to get off the ground for over 10 years. And, it was 10 years ago that people looked at me and said, why would you want to do this? Or, I thought you were smart. How come you don't understand this? But they're the same people that didn't understand why neurodiversity was important to me.
So I appreciate you clarifying and sharing that. We do have to address something real quick. So Shantae, so treating anxiety is what we should treat first. And I have to preface this by saying that we are not medical professionals. At least I don't remember you having a doctorate. So what we can do is we could provide advice on the research that we've done, on the experience that we've had. But the thing about neurodiversity, and this is something that I wish more people would understand, is that there's no two people that are exactly alike, and no two people are going to follow the exact same path. So and I'm going to let Lisa respond to your question because it was directed at her. What I could tell you is that it's not just the anxiety and depression. There were studies that were being done about 10 years ago looking at the similarities between sleep issues and not getting enough oxygen during the night and ADHD, and seeing if some ADHD diagnosis were actually sleep issues. But what the data shows is that people with ADHD do have a tendency to have more trouble with sleep than those without. So so how you go about focusing on the solution is really going to be a very personal thing. It has to make sense to you. Lisa, I want to give it to you because obviously this is a direct response to comment.
Absolutely. I second everything that Dan just said. It's my experience, and that is what I want to make sure everyone understands here. As a neurodiversity consultant, I want people to see me as a thought partner. I'm here to share my experiences. I'm here to share what's worked for us, but I'm not here to diagnose, to direct, or to tell you what and how to do something. So I want to share that. We tried the ADHD first. Now, could the ADHD meds had actually done the trick with our younger son? Or if we had ADHD and anxiety meds at the same time, but we didn't want him on that much medication at 8 years old, could we not have even have known? it's that chicken or the egg thing, Shantae. So I can't tell you what's going to work best for you. I can just tell you what worked best for us and what the psychiatrist that I sat in on a webinar through Chad, which is all about ADD, ADHD focus. There's chapters all over the country. So that's something that you may want to dive into and ask them for some guidance. If there is a licensed psychiatrist that could share with you, this person had studies done. They were working on studies, and that's why they recommended doing the anxiety first. For us, when we made that switch, and about 3 months in, we were able to see that the anxiety came down enough for our son to be able to start to access in his brain the ability to process the tools necessary to help him. And with him, another thing that's very interesting is, so most people that have ADHD or ADD have really good recall and really poor working memory. I'm going to tell you that's not always, because my son has extremely good working memory and extremely low recall. So it's really, really frustrating for him on top of everything else, which triggers more anxiety, because when you're in conversation, he can say stuff back to you, but the next day, it's like that movie 50 First Dates, where he has to be reminded of it, and then he can remember it.
Lisa, I want to interject because you said something that just hit home really, really, really hard, and I want to make sure that we emphasize it. Growing up, one of the great frustrations with my mother and my mother was a 25-year kindergarten teacher, is that we'd be sitting down and she'd teach me something, and I'd be able to recall it and repeat it back. But then 5 minutes later, when I went back, I couldn't do it. It was this insane level of frustration that built in me. But for my mother, and I'm 37 years old, so this is going back to really when we just were starting to understand neurodiversity and ADHD. Not all this information was present. So she was then getting frustrated with herself, wondering what she was doing wrong. And it wasn't that. We can't, and better than anyone, mental health is what I really focus everything around. There are times where it's natural to get frustrated. There are times where it's natural to get upset. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that this is part of how those of us that deal with these specific things are made up. And once we accept it, then while we may get frustrated, we then have the ability to be like, okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes. I'm going to be frustrated, but then we're going to go right back to it. And there may just be a different learning technique that needs to be used. Some people are repetitive. Some people are visual. I remember that I learned math at a very early age. And one of the things was there was these cassettes, math. Yes. For those that don't know what cassettes are, Google it.
I know, I'm almost 50. I don't know about age wise.
And it was math rap. And I would listen to like these math rap songs as I was going to sleep. And I became very, very good because it was a repetitive thing. And that's how I learned best. So thank you. Thank you for really bringing that up. I also want to mention to people that we're also not here to give you information on whether or not medication is good or bad. That's, again, an individual choice. So we won't be touching on that aspect. It's just better left for professionals. But what we can talk about is some of these things that are more intrinsic to the process. So let's do this. I want to make sure that we go over the journey. And I think it might be helpful to people if I bring up your website, because then we could kind of tell the story through the website, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, as you're doing that, before I forget, because I wrote some thoughts down here, mindfulness is something that's also at the core of everything. It has helped my younger son so much. And so if you do not do visualization, if you do not do any of that, I think it's a really big thing. So for me, what I have come to recognize through all of this is my years as an elite level athlete and all the sports psychologist stuff that we did, all that visualization, I have learned how to compartmentalize and zone out everything around me and get laser focused, which is a very big plus and minus to ADHD, right? When you get into a groove on something, it's one of the things people don't understand often is you can get laser focused into something, but it doesn't mean you might not remember anything else that's happening because you're so laser focused on, on what's going on. But the ability to tap into that calm and teach your brain to just kind of settle, even if for a minute at a time, because it never really shuts off, is also helpful. So that's just something that I know personally has helped me and has helped my younger son. And then one other thing I want to mention that's not on the site is you had talked about the different ways that people learn. I also remember growing up and sitting in my parents' office and studying and studying and studying, and then taking a test and falling and ending up with like a C in class. And I'm like, I knew all of this, but I go in class, I was an awful student. I couldn't remember anything, but anything I did with my friends, anything I taught, I spoke about, I interacted with, never forgot it. And because what I came to realize when I became a trainer, when I was doing training years ago in HR leadership, was the visual, the auditory, the written, and the kinesthetic. I learn by all of them. So I am a multimodal learner. And what that means is I learn through several different modalities. And that is how now I've been able to retain information. And one of the reasons I bring this up is you were talking about those cassettes. My younger son is getting ready to study for his bar mitzvah. I don't even know if you knew that we were Jewish. And he, because of his processing and his recall and all those issues, our rabbi said, I have taught kids with autism that were barely speakers all of their Torah portions and everything else that needed to happen. How does he ever forget a song? And I said, no. It's because you're using a different part of your brain that you were able to retain that information. So we're actually going to tutor my younger son through song.
That is amazing. And honestly, it's how I memorized for my bar mitzvah.
Oh.
So, mishpokah, that's truly amazing. And there's so many stories that we could tell about growing up with ADHD. And I got to tell you, I had the same problem with tests. I'm still a horrible test taker. Something I don't talk about often. I'm not going to get too far into this because it's not the point. But I think I got through school with like a C- average. I got into college by the skin of my teeth, and I wound up failing out of college and having to fight to get back in. Yes, Brian, thank you for spelling that right. So going back to it, it's a constant struggle. So let's go a little bit to your website. And I just want to I know you're taking notes, so I just want to put a couple things on here for you. Definitely want to explain the difference between IEP and 504. Outside of that, I will be taking your lead and chiming in when necessary.
All right. So then maybe we start with that and then we can go through the site from there.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'm gonna a LinkedIn user had said about learning to be more patient, and you'll see some of that in the site as well. So the difference, an IEP is goals that are specifically measurable goals that are necessary to close the gaps to allow someone to access curriculum. And I don't even think I just explained it the right way because my brain was just going all over the place there. But in the simplest of form, a 504 is just accommodations. So if you are a person with ADHD, but you are on grade level or above grade level and you are not falling behind as a learner, then you probably do not need an IEP. You need a 504 plan because you qualify for it with ADHD, and you need things like extra time on tests. You need things like maybe a whiteboard closer so you can see, because you can't keep up with the processing and the recall, so you know what's happening. You might need notes before and after your executive functioning, can't talk, maybe completely out of whack. You need a planner or organizer. All of those things help you get your thoughts together and help you get through, whether it's a test or classwork or other such things. But if you heard, I didn't say anything about any gaps in learning, which is where the IEP is a different. Thank you. So yeah, I was going to say there's definitely some very good ABCs and things out there in terms of that. But you can't just get a 504 or an IEP. That's also something. So you can't just go in tomorrow and say, hey, my kid needs this, or I need this, or anything like that. You can't just do that. There are assessments and tests and things that need to happen. There are IEP meetings that need to take place. And then you can decide based on the facts, based on the data, based on the psychology evaluations and all the other data, whether it's OT, speech, you can then make a decision, objective decision on whether or not the person's disability is impacting their ability to show up and access the curriculum.
So they're really complementary pieces. One is meant to provide the goals, the other is meant to provide the accommodation. So combined, but you don't necessarily need both of them. I do appreciate that. One thing I wanted to mention before we
Dan,
get
with that, with an IEP, there is something called supplemental aids and services, and those are like, my younger son has like 3 pages of accommodations, which that's too many. So we had to narrow that down too, because there's not someone that can put them all together. So I just wanted to make sure people understand, if you have an IEP, you would have accommodations within that IEP. You don't need, you wouldn't have a 504 and an IEP. You have one or the other.
Got it. Okay, that makes more sense. Admittedly, it's been a while for me since I've had an IEP. So I appreciate you clarifying. Before we get to your site, one thing that I think we have to touch on, or at least I think it's an important thing to touch on, is that there's a lot of people that may be going and bringing their children or going themselves to doctors and coming out of it saying, I know I have an issue, but I don't feel like my doctor is understanding me. Now, what I'm about to say is personal opinion, but the data backs it up. In medical school, they do not fixate on neurodiversity. So in my personal opinion, there are not nearly enough specialists that do, which is why it's so important to really find who does have those specializations locally, see if they're affordable. A lot of areas have regional centers that you could touch base with that have resources. And I'm sure your website goes through this, but for somebody that really is having that frustration level with their doctor and needs to find somebody that's going to understand them better, what is your response to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, my website doesn't have that depth of information. My site is focused really on the programs for parents and educators. I do some stuff with corporations as well, because out of necessity, people have asked me that know me and that know what I've been through in corporate. But my recommendation would be trust your gut. You can get frustrated with the person who doesn't get you, but don't give up on yourself. If you truly think something's happening, there are people and resources out there. And I said Chad is all over the country. And I'm not sure if it's international or not, but I can tell you that there are organizations that are specifically focused on executive functioning. They're going to have a tie-in to ADD and ADHD specifically for sure. There are like the CHADs that are specifically focused on ADD and ADHD. So if nothing else, I would check in with one of those organizations. And the other thing would be do some research for psychologists that are focused on supporting, if you're looking at for yourself, adults with ADD and ADHD. There are a lot of counseling centers, at least in my area, I'm in Maryland, that are very focused on helping people with ADD and ADHD come to terms with it, let go of that guilt and shame and that beat down that we were given for so many years, saying we just didn't get it or we were just dumb or whatever the case was, those labels we were given, that can help you go through that.
Oh, and thank you for that. I'm posting in the chat. So at one point in my life, I thought I was going to be an ADHD coach, and I wound up getting put in contact with a gentleman by the name of David Gwerk, who is the owner and founder of the ADHD Coaching Academy. It's the largest school in the world for coaches, and there are a number of there are a number of resources on the website. So I'm going to post this in the chat so that everybody has access to them. All right, let's get to your website because it's a gorgeous website. I love it. And quite frankly, this is going to be something that is going to be a tremendous asset for so many parents out there. So I'm going to go on mute. Take it away. If you need a break, just let me know.
Okay. So you need to clarify. Am I going to just tell you like where to click through and you'll kind of...
Yeah. Tell me how you want to go through it. And we'll take it from there.
All right. So go ahead and scroll down. We'll stop right there for a minute. So I think this is really grounding in who I am and what I do. Easing the pressure for parents and educators. I could go into so much detail about the blame, the shame, the guilt, the people that told me it's just going to go away, ignore it, don't worry. The people I had to stop talking to when I was getting my first son diagnosed, the people that told me they could fix my son, my child, fix me. What's wrong with you? It goes on and on. And so I am really easing that pressure for others that have someone that falls into one of the things that is in the parentheses, the ADHD, anxiety, autism, dyslexia, processing disorders, so much more. When you don't know what you don't know, it is extremely hard to navigate the journey. And then having the stress and pressure on top of it that, oh my God, I need to do this right, or people don't understand me, or what did I do wrong? Why is my child not learning? Getting to the root cause is so key to creating that foundation that guides the journey forward. And so that's what I do. And then if you want to just keep scrolling, we won't go into the about right now. The personalized support, the gaining clarity, confidence, and courage. Scroll up a little bit more, Dan. Down a little bit more. Sorry. Thank you. So in what I do, there's 3 facets of it, and there's 2 sections. So there's the parents and there's the educators. I'm really going to focus on the parents today. If somebody is an educator or they want to share this with an educator, they can go ahead and do it. I don't even really put out there what I do for educators because they'll come to me when they're ready or when they feel like someone's listening to them and they'll invest in it. But the parents are really what I want to focus on. And the majority of the parents that are educators come to me because they aren't getting what they need in the school system for themselves or their child, but they happen to be doing inclusion classroom and they don't know how to deal with these kids. So it comes back to me, the grounding of the parent and the education. So the 3 facets here, there's 3 different sections. There's the clarity, where I simplify and support the journey with tools, resources, and trainings that are personalized for the parent. And I'm not going to go into it too much now, because if we navigate the website, you'll get to see the facets of it. And at times, because of my ADHD, I get long-winded. And so I'm going to let some of the words speak for themselves, because they'll be clear and simple for you. The middle one is the confidence. And this is where I find I spend a lot of time with clients, but it crosses over, because helping you embrace the journey. And I'm a parent and a professional. I've weathered this storm for 15 years as a parent and many years as a person without even realizing what I was dealing with, just thinking I couldn't remember things because I was just dumb, when I know I wasn't now. That's a big part of where I connect with a lot of people, because they can understand where I've come from and where I'm going. And I've learned so many things along the way. And I have such a depth of understanding of having that village of people, that dream team to support you, and how important that is to have the right people with you when you need them. The right people with you when you need them, because everyone's not going to be able to help you in every facet of this journey. That's okay. So if you give yourself permission to know that just because someone means well doesn't mean you need to tap into them, you're going to be much less stressed out. And then the third one, and I'm not giving the ins and outs of the actual services. I just want to kind of ground people in these pieces and where they come from. The courage is learning to trust that knowledge, learning to trust your voice, to navigate the journey so that you can then advocate, and that you can become that ally for yourself, for your kids, and then they become the ally and the advocate for themselves as they go into adulthood. So what Dan and I have been talking about, others don't have to go through, because they've now truly learned how to manage, how to cope, the tools, and how to speak up for what they need in order to get where they want to be in life. All right. So
I don't know if you want me to go through this.
yeah, no, I think I'm just gonna you can leave it here for 1 second. Those are my kids, by the way, when they were much younger. So you'll see lots of pictures here.
They're adorable, still probably a little bit older than mine are right now. But I can certainly appreciate that.
It's one of my favorite pictures. So
It's a great photo.
thank you. As we're going to go on the next thing, I know Dusty made a comment here I'm looking at. I want to, so accommodations, correct. Accommodations do not modify the content. And I'm not going to go into the details on the modification versus accommodations, but at some point, if you're on a diploma track versus a non-diploma track, that's when the modifications become a key conversation, when that decision is being made between accommodations and in-depth modifications. So there's a difference between chunk learning and having half of a homework assignment versus doing a completely different thing on a different path to get a certification versus a diploma. So I won't go into those details without having all my notes up, because I can't remember all of that stuff without reminding myself and then talking about it. So I won't go into that. I just wanted to say, yes, there's a difference between accommodations and modifications. Okay, can we go to the about?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So this talks about a little bit, just, I truly believe every person deserves to live their best life. It'll give you a little bit of background into why. You can keep scrolling down. These are my boys again. And if I had to say in a simple sentence, Journey to Bloom provides clarity. Because I understand that in order to be successful, you need the clarity around the information, the support, and the tools that guide you forward. And part of the reason I completely dove headfirst into this was I started this years ago, but I really just got it lifted off the ground this year. And it was out of complete frustration of seeing what wasn't happening for my younger son, even with so much that I knew and the relationships I had with the school system, and still what wasn't happening. And being so frustrated with it that I pulled my son and put him in private. And I stopped doing the career transformation coaching and spent a year and a half researching where these major gaps were and how I could best help parents not have to go through what I was still going through, even though I thought I was so far ahead of it at this point. So you can read through this. I'm not going to go and read through every piece of it, but I really am intentionally trying to find a simpler way to help parents navigate this journey. These are just some of my certifications, qualifications. I really like to build things from a relationship perspective, the trust factor, and yet I know that it's really important for many people to know that you have certifications. And so these are some of the ones I have. Also, over 10 years ago, I got an ABA certification because in order for my older son to get applied behavior therapy in California, they actually put the parents through a 20-hour certification course so that we could be consistent in applying at home, following up on the antecedents, behaviors, consequences, and then pulling them through. I don't have that on there. It's been a very long time and it was through their state, but that is also something that I have gone through in order to become a better parent. You know, we don't need a degree to be a parent, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately, but unfortunately, right? You need a license to do other stuff. But so scroll up, just so, yeah, keep going. No, sorry, scroll down a little bit. I keep saying up, yeah, I'm saying down. So come back. There you go. So helping simplify the journey for people like me is my life's purpose. If somebody says, what is your purpose? Like, this is my passion. It is my purpose. I have no doubt after so many years of people saying, why aren't you doing more? I have finally trusted myself enough to say, I'm here now. I get it. I know it. I understand it. And I can help others solve these problems. So that's also, you know, what got me here to where we are today. If you want to go back up to under the about, there should be my story. Yep. All right. This goes through some of the logo and a little bit about my background. And I will let all of you take a look at this if you're interested. The name came from the inspiration of my kids and the journey, what we've endured so far. Bloom was my favorite great aunt's last name, and it was just very fitting to use that, and it's just really worked out. I also want to just share a little bit of my heartstrings because the logo, if you look closely, they're heart-shaped flowers. And if you look at it was at one point a leaf, like that was an infinity sign. Now it's now shaped in a heart because I actually rebranded last year, but it's still an infinity. And that's because it's a never-ending journey. It's about the journey. It's not about the destination. When you are able to gain the tools and understand what's happening and be able to move through it, you will be able to hit the outcomes that you're looking for. So if you,
I'll get back. I just wanted to zoom in on that.
I can't see where I am. And I know we're, I'll speed it up a little bit here. Scroll down a little bit more. All right. So this gives you a little bit more about my background. Growing up as an elite level athlete, I learned the meaning of sportsmanship, resilience, how to navigate the world as a competitive athlete at the highest level. So in my mind, navigating this journey should have been really easy. And it was not. I mean, it has been the hardest thing I have ever had to go through. And I'm not one to ask for help. So that was also a learning journey for me, was letting others help me in getting through this, and lost myself in the process and had to come back up from that too. So you need to take time to put you first as well in order to have the energy and space to help your children. Scroll down a little further. All right. More pictures of my kids and their best friends. I'm not going, oh, and that picture on the right here in this one, yep, that was my younger son during virtual learning. That literally is a picture of where he was during virtual learning. He was there with a computer on his head, spinning in a chair, crying, but not being able to show up and access curriculum because it just wasn't working for him. So these are real life. This is my life. I'm not going to go into the story, but I do want to just have Dan point to my first true ally. This is, you can read through this story if you'd like, but this really gives you a glimpse into how my journey started and my very first person in my dream team, and someone that is still 13 years later, a huge supporter of my older son and one of my biggest encouragers to do what I'm doing today. All right, let's go ahead and go to for parents. All right, so go ahead and scroll down. Finally got it, right halfway through. These are the offerings. So when you hover over each of them, they will take you into, you can click into those sections. You don't need to click into them at the moment, but I just wanted you all to know that. And it gives you a more clear understanding of the clarity is the journey map. The confidence is that one-on-one confidant and support, gaining the confidence, understanding where you are, helping you navigate the conversations that are happening in the school with the psychologist, with the specialists, with the whoever it is, the medical doctors, the people that may not get what's happening, trying to speak to them in a way that's going to resonate with them, helping you just formulate your words and gain that clarity. And then the courage one is really the IEP and 504 advisory. So getting ready to prepare for a meeting, going in, whether you need me to be at the meeting with you, that is the outcomes. So the clarity and the confidence leads you to the courage to show up in those conversations and have the tools and resources and confidence to be a member of the team. And that's a really important phrase, be a member of the team. You are part of that IEP team or that 504 planning team. So your voice matters. No matter what somebody tells you, your voice matters. All right, scroll down for me. Go ahead and keep scrolling. All right, so throughout the site, you'll see a couple of different, my brain done, testimonials. And you'll go ahead and you can read through those as you would like. If you could scroll up and click into any of the, the clarity, confidence, or courage, I don't care which one you click into. All right. So they're all set up the same, each of these tabs. This one is the 101 confidant and support. You can see a little bit of an overview. Then I go into the why it helps. And then I go into what you receive. And then I go into how it works. And then we talk about the investment. And let's sit on this for just a moment. This is the stages of the journey. And whether you're starting at soil where you suspect something's happening, you're seeking guidance on how to begin to request assessments and supports, you have the diagnosis or you suspect you have it, the assessments are complete now and you don't know where to go, or you've got it all and you're just trying to make forward progress. So soil, just getting started, seeds, something's planted, the sun, and the substance. And when you think about this, they're this way on purpose, the way I have it written out. And when you think about the sun, I'm going to stick on the sun for a minute. Those are, you have these experts that come in when you need them and go out when you don't. And I'm going to kind of tie this back to something else. when you have your support system, they can come in when you need them and go out when you don't. Sun sets, rises and sets, right? So you don't always have to feel like you need to lean into someone. When you're going through this journey, if someone's draining your energy as you're trying to talk with them and they're trying to give you help, take a step back and think about whether or not they're the right person to be working with you at this given time. That's just something from my experiences. All right. I know we're close to time here.
It's okay. So the reason I try to keep it to an hour, everyone, is simply so that I could rebroadcast it later on. We have about 4 minutes left. Lisa, I'm going to leave this really up to you. If you want to expand beyond, then we could absolutely do that. If you feel like you've captured everything, then we could close it out. It's really up to you.
Okay. Well, I can just say one more thing and then we can wrap up. Do me a favor and go to the resource tab. So in here, if you scroll down, I just have some things I wish I knew at the start of the journey. And then if you continue to scroll down, because you can all look at this when you want. And there's articles, there's some websites. There are going to be more articles, more websites, lots of different things that are going to be coming out there. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate the website. That's not my thing. And so trying to add stuff into it, it will come. But if you don't see something and you want to know something, just let me know. And there's also some FAQs towards the bottom that you can, and some books that I have found very helpful in the past since I've been going through this journey. So this is just a starting point. There's lots of other things if you know or think of anything. Acronyms, it's a whole long list of all the acronyms that you hear because there are a lot of them. They're all there. And then my contact page is the last thing off to the right at the top. You can either contact me here under the Let's Chat, or it's not in the best location to realize this, but where the heart is, where it says client support, if you click into that, it should take you to a short questionnaire that gives me some more insights into your background, what you might want to talk about in your situation. And then we have a no obligation chat from there to see if I can help, if you want me to help, and if it makes sense for us to work together.
Okay. We got it. Lisa, we could talk for hours about this because there's so many things that go along with the ADHD journey. But for right now, I want to really say thank you. I know we didn't get to every single comment and question that was made, but I promise you I will get back to you with it. This will not be the last time I have you on my live, assuming that you don't hate me after this.
No, I love it.
We'll have you
is gold, right?
Yeah, we'll have you on again. Maybe I'll have you come on with Catherine McCord and some other of the ADHD experts in my network, and we'll do a panel discussion. I think that would be a lot of fun. So for those watching, I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to replay this. I usually replay these on Sundays around 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, just at a time where it's better for everybody to see. In the meantime, make sure you're checking out journeytobloom.com and you have her contact information right there. From Lisa and I, we say have a great day and a fantastic weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.